Welcome to the Pardis channel. Today, we explain Prophets Isaiah chapter 17 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to embark on a really fascinating factual study of this text, examining some incredibly vivid imagery. We'll break down the original Hebrew text together, looking at the direct words of the prophet to understand exactly what is happening historically and what timeless message is actually hidden inside these ancient verses. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the context of Isaiah 17, do a step-by-step walkthrough, clarify the text, look at key simple ideas, draw out some practical life lessons, and finally wrap up with a chapter recap. Section 1. Context of Isaiah 17. To truly understand this chapter, we have to look at the entire narrative arc from start to finish. And just as a reminder, we're focusing strictly on the Peshat, the simple, plain, literal meaning of the text, without straying into deep hidden symbolism. Now, the chapter opens in verses 1 through 9 with the Burden of Damascus. The prophet describes a military alliance between the kingdom of Aram, which was centered in Damascus, and the northern kingdom of Israel, often called Jacob or Ephraim in the text. Well, this alliance is doomed. The prophet declares that Damascus will literally be reduced to a ruinous heap, and the glory of Jacob will ultimately fade. You see, because they relied on this political maneuver rather than on God, their strength is going to be stripped away until only a few gleanings are left. The text compares it to just a few stray olives left on the absolute topmost branch after a harvest. This really sets the stage for the crucial question, why is this happening? And that brings us right to verses 10 through 12, which detail the root cause of this national tragedy. Section 2. Step-by-step walkthrough. The text explains the root cause beginning in verse 10 with a very direct historical accusation. It says, "For thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, and thou hast not been mindful of the rock of thy stronghold." Notice the absolute permanence of the titles used here, God of thy salvation and rock of thy stronghold. So what is the crucial point here? It's that the people of the northern kingdom had completely abandoned their reliance on God. The prophet uses the metaphor of a rock and a stronghold. I mean, think of a massive, completely immovable fortress built on stone. Historically, this is what they were supposed to rely on. It's solid, it's safe, and it's their true source of salvation. But the text tells us they have forgotten, and they have not been mindful of this foundation. They're actively turning their backs on their most secure identity. Because they forgot their true foundation, the prophet tells us exactly what they did instead. The text continues, "Therefore thou didst plant plants of pleasantness, and didst set it with slips of a stranger." This brilliantly illustrates human nature, especially given the historical context at the time. You know, when a nation forgets its sturdy rock, it naturally goes looking for something else to provide security. The people turned to planting foreign seeds and adopting outside ways. They went to strangers, specifically the foreign power of Damascus, hoping to create alliances that seemed pleasant or attractive. We have to remember, they weren't trying to fail. They were seeking safety in a really dangerous geopolitical landscape. But they looked in the exact wrong place. They essentially traded their immovable rock for fragile little plant cuttings from foreign lands. But let's see what happens to these fragile plants. Verse 11 says, "In the day of thy planting thou didst make it to grow, and in the morning thou didst make thy seed to blossom. A heap of boughs in the day of grief and of desperate pain." It's a beautiful but incredibly tragic image. The prophet acknowledges that, at first, these foreign alliances actually seem to work. In the day of planting, it grows. In the morning, it blossoms. It looks like a really quick success. But then comes the harvest. And instead of a harvest of safety and salvation, it yields a heap of boughs in the day of grief and of desperate pain. The quick fix of relying on worldly, foreign powers ultimately brings utter devastation. The pleasant plants they spent so much time cultivating turn out to be nothing but grief. And this leads us right into the terrifying consequence described in the very next verse, verse 12. "Ah, the uproar of many peoples, that roar like the roaring of the seas, and the rushing of nations that rush like the rushing of mighty waters." So, what happens when you rely on the worldly powers of many peoples instead of God? Eventually, you have to face the chaotic, overwhelming uproar of those very nations. The consequence of abandoning the silent, steady strength of the rock is that you are left completely exposed to the deafening roar of invading, chaotic, worldly powers. However, the chapter actually concludes in verses 13 and 14 by noting a profound shift. While these nations roar and rush in like mighty waters, God will ultimately rebuke them. The text says they will be chased away like chaff in the wind before a storm, which proves once again that worldly powers are chaotic and fleeting, and only the true rock remains standing in the end. Section 3. Clarifying the text. Let's clarify one of the ancient metaphors used here. The most unique phrase we saw is slips of a stranger. Now, a slip is just a small cutting from a plant used to grow a new one. By calling them slips of a stranger, the text is using a very clear idiom. It means taking foreign political alliances or outside cultural practices and trying to plant them in your own soil to find security. It is the exact opposite of trusting in the God of your salvation. It's looking outward to the world for help rather than relying on your true foundation. Okay, so we've understood the simple, historical meaning of the full chapter. But what does this actually mean for us today? Section 4. Key, simple ideas. We can distill everything we just read into a few very clear, impartial truths based directly on the prophet's words. First, relying on foreign powers or strangers ultimately fails. It might look really pleasant at first, but it ends in grief. Second, worldly success is incredibly fleeting. Just like that seed that blossoms quickly in the morning but is totally ruined by the time of the harvest, quick fixes simply do not last. And finally, true stability comes only from God, the rock, the stronghold. Anything else is just a fragile plant waiting to wither. Section 5. Practical life lessons. Here is the everyday wisdom we can take away from this historical account. Number 1, don't forget your true foundation. In our busy everyday lives, it is so easy to be unmindful of what truly anchors us. Number 2, beware of quick fixes that cause pain. You know, when we face difficulties, we are so often tempted to grab onto the slips of a stranger, a fast, easy, worldly solution that promises immediate pleasantness, but ultimately brings grief. And number 3, build your life on solid ground. Trade the fragile plants for the immovable rock. Section 6. Chapter Recap. Let's unhurriedly review the exact step-by-step narrative arc of Isaiah 17. The chapter begins with the doom of Damascus and the fading glory of Israel due to their misplaced trust. It then explains the root cause. The people literally forgot the rock of their salvation. Because of that spiritual amnesia, they sought pleasant but foreign alliances, planting seeds that didn't belong to them. While those seeds sprouted quickly, they reaped a harvest of desperate pain. Without their stronghold, they faced the terrifying uproar of nations. Yet, in the end, God rebukes those chaotic forces, scattering them like chaff in the wind, leaving only the unshakable foundation. So ask yourself today, are you building your life on an immovable rock, or are you hoping a fragile slip from a stranger will save you? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.